In many spiritual and energetic dynamics, especially those involving twin flames or deep soul connections, the divine masculine is often seen as the one who runs, resists, or remains emotionally distant. But what happens when the roles reverse? What causes the divine masculine, once guarded and withdrawn, to suddenly become the chaser? This shift isn't random. It's part of a deeper transformation that unfolds through healing, awakening, and energetic realignment. As the divine feminine steps into her power, detaching from codependency and choosing self-love, the masculine begins to feel the void that avoidance once filled. The chase begins, not out of desperation, but from an inner call to reclaim what the soul knows is sacred. In this piece, we'll explore the key reasons behind this powerful reversal, what it means, why it happens, and how it reflects the evolution of both energies on the path to union. Breaking the silence, why the divine masculine awakens to the connection. Late, in many divine partnerships, the divine masculine often appears emotionally unavailable, unresponsive, or even unaware of the depth of the connection, at least at first. This can leave the divine feminine confused, heartbroken, or questioning the entire experience. But there's a deeper reason why the masculine's awakening tends to come later, and why that timing matters. The divine masculine energy is traditionally wired to prioritize structure, logic, and control. This means that emotional or spiritual awareness, especially the kind that shakes foundations, can feel threatening or unfamiliar. When faced with a deep soul bond, their instinct may be to retreat, deny, or rationalize it away. This is not because they don't feel it, it's because they feel it too deeply and lack the tools to process it. Unlike the divine feminine, who often awakens to the connection early and intuitively, the masculine's journey typically requires external triggers. Life challenges, emotional voids, or even the absence of the feminine herself can act as mirrors, forcing them to confront the truth they've buried. This delayed awakening is not a flaw. It's a necessary part of their soul's growth. Silence becomes a coping mechanism, a shield from overwhelming vulnerability. But over time, that silence begins to echo. The connection doesn't disappear, it intensifies. Eventually, the divine masculine can no longer ignore what's calling from within. And when that awakening hits, it hits hard. That's when the roles often shift, and the masculine becomes the one who reaches out, seeks answers, and begins to chase what once scared him most. The ego. Collapse, when control no longer works. For much of the early soul connection journey, the divine masculine often finds refuge in control. Control over their emotions, their surroundings, the pace of the connection, and, most significantly, their own vulnerability. It's not uncommon for the masculine to seem cold, distant, or even avoidant. But this isn't because he lacks feeling, it's because he's terrified of losing control over something that defies logic. The divine masculine is conditioned by society, family, and internal programming to equate vulnerability with weakness. Opening the heart means exposing wounds long buried. So instead, the ego steps in. The ego crafts a narrative. This isn't real, I don't need this, I can live without her. And for a time, that narrative works. He distracts himself with work, shallow relationships, status, or solitude. He convinces himself he's in charge. But the soul knows better as the divine feminine rises, healing, detaching, embodying her worth. The masculine feels the energetic shift. What once felt like control starts to feel like loss. The feminine's absence, or her refusal to chase becomes the mirror he can't avoid. The silence he once relied on for power now feels deafening. The connection doesn't fade, it intensifies. Dreams, synchronicities, memories, everything begins to pull at him, and the ego starts to crack. This phase is painful. The divine masculine may experience emotional overwhelm, anxiety, spiritual confusion, or even a dark night of the soul. Old belief systems collapse. Relationships built on ego or convenience fall apart. The strategies that once numbed his heart no longer bring peace. In fact, they begin to create suffering. The control he fought so hard to maintain becomes a prison. And that's when the ego begins to truly collapse, not through conscious choice, but through exhaustion. The divine masculine reaches a threshold where he can no longer deny the truth. The connection is real, transformative, and deeply rooted in his soul. This is not a moment of weakness, it's the start of true strength. As the false identity falls away, a softer, more authentic version of the masculine begins to emerge. No longer driven by pride or fear, he starts to feel, not just emotionally, but spiritually. The connection begins to make sense in ways it never did before. And with that clarity comes a new urge, not to control, but to reconnect. The divine masculine becomes the chaser, not to regain control, but to reclaim what his soul knows is sacred. It's a pursuit fueled by humility, recognition, and love. The ego collapses, the heart awakens, and the journey, once led by fear, begins to be led by truth. Energetic role reversal, when the feminine pulls back. One of the most powerful and misunderstood moments in a divine connection is the energetic role reversal, when the divine feminine, once open-hearted and emotionally invested, chooses to pull back. This shift doesn't come from spite or ego. It comes from spiritual growth, self-respect, and deep inner healing. And it's this moment that often triggers the divine masculine to become the chaser. In the early stages of the connection, it's common for the divine feminine to take on the role of the emotional anchor. She feels the soul bond intuitively, sometimes even before the masculine consciously registers it. She holds space, tries to nurture the connection, and often waits patiently, hoping he'll wake up to the truth of what they share. But as time passes and the masculine continues to run, deny, or stay emotionally unavailable, something profound happens within her. She begins to realize that waiting, chasing, or overgiving is not love, it's self-abandonment. This is when the feminine shifts from longing to empowerment. She no longer tries to fix the dynamic or prove her worth. Instead, she pours that energy back into herself. She reclaims her time, her peace, her passion, her purpose. She begins to live fully, not for the connection, but for her own soul evolution. And in doing so, she detaches, not out of bitterness, but out of deep spiritual alignment. This energetic withdrawal is felt by the masculine on a soul level, even if he can't put it into words. Where once there was a consistent energetic pull, an open channel of love, attention, and emotional presence, there is now stillness, space, silence. And that silence is louder than anything she could have ever said. It interrupts the masculine's sense of comfort. The energy that once fed his avoidance is gone. He can no longer feel her waiting. He can no longer sense her chasing. And that absence begins to create urgency. The masculine begins to feel what she once felt. The longing, the loss, the spiritual pull. But this time, he's the one awakening to it. This energetic reversal is not punishment. It's divine timing. It's the sacred mechanism that pushes both counterparts into balance. The feminine stands in her sovereignty, and the masculine is now faced with a choice: continue numbing himself and feel the pain intensify, or rise into his own heart and meet the connection from a place of truth. When he chooses the latter, the chase begins, not out of fear of losing her, but from the soul's remembrance that she is not just someone he desires. She is a mirror of his own healing, awakening, and divine destiny. The roles shift, but the love remains. And with that shift, the connection finally begins to evolve beyond the wounds and into wholeness. Soul contracts and divine timing, the bigger picture behind the chase. To fully understand why the divine masculine becomes the chaser, we must zoom out and view the connection from a higher perspective, one that transcends physical events, temporary roles, or emotional confusion. At the soul level, every interaction, separation, and reunion is orchestrated with purpose. This is where soul contracts and divine timing come into play. A soul contract is an agreement made between two souls before incarnation, a sacred promise to help each other grow, awaken, and remember their true divine essence. These contracts are not about fairy tale romance or linear timelines. They are deeply spiritual blueprints designed to challenge the ego, heal karmic patterns, and catalyze ascension through love. In many soul contracts between the divine feminine and divine masculine, one soul, often the feminine, awakens to the connection first. She remembers the mission. She feels the depth. She opens her heart. Meanwhile, the masculine often chooses the more resistant path, embodying the role of the runner, the denier, or the emotionally guarded one. This dynamic is not a flaw. It is by design. Why? Because growth happens through contrast. The feminine's early awakening teaches her surrender, patience, and self-love. The masculine's resistance teaches him the cost of control, the pain of emotional suppression, and the truth that no amount of external distraction can replace soul alignment. Both are being stretched. Both are evolving. And at the exact moment it's meant to happen, not a minute too soon or too late, the roles shift. This is divine timing, the orchestration of events aligned with soul readiness, not ego desire. It ensures that neither soul comes into union prematurely, when wounds might sabotage the connection. Instead, divine timing arranges the exact triggers, collapses, and awakenings each soul needs in order to return to the connection as their true self. When the divine feminine pulls back and the masculine finally begins to awaken, it isn't random. It's the fulfillment of the contract. It's the point where his lessons have ripened, where his soul can no longer deny what the ego tried so hard to forget. The connection begins to feel not just important, but destined. That's when the chase begins, not for validation, but for alignment with the soul's original promise. The chase is never just about getting the other person back. It's about coming back to self, coming back to truth, coming back to the love that was never truly lost, only buried beneath fear. From this vantage point, the journey is no longer about who ran or who chased. It becomes about two souls finally meeting in divine timing, each having walked through their shadows to find the light. And in that light, the original contract is fulfilled, not as a task, but as a sacred reunion.